Blackrock, Head of Strategic Partnerships.
On institutional DeFi, but there will be a role for smart contracts, for deep pools of liquidity who can basically create really creative pairs and allow transactions in a different way than can happen in the centralized space. People talk a lot about, oh, DeFi won't work because it's automated market making and we need central order limit books. Like, that is just a fig leaf. We need clear understanding of who is in a pool. You may have seen our friends at Uniswap launched version 4. If you read carefully, there's almost an ability to create a permissioned pool, a permissioned contract with a group of people.
Welcome to the DeFi Standard, and this is Mickey B. Fresh. Oh, this is from the State of Crypto at Coinbase Institutional's Summit for Institutions. Now, this panel I found the most interesting because it had Fidelity, it had Blackrock, it had Franklin Templeton. I mean, these are the big asset management side, and they are all in on this. Even Blackrock, like ETF. You know, you hear Larry Fink on the public and all that stuff, but this is the real insights. This is where you find the insights of what's really happening. And I try to go to the sources and get the most up-to-date insights, because you hear a lot of narratives and a lot of preconceived assumptions and biases that just, quite frankly, are not relevant. And they're blocking people from thinking outside the box. And the SEC thing has scarred, community, including myself. It's definitely taken a toll on all of us.
Markets editor of the Financial Times. We're here to talk about the future of financial services and crypto. And with me in order, I have got Greg Tussar, the Coinbase Head of Institutional Product, Cynthia Lowe-Bessette, Head of Fidelity's Digital Asset Management, Roger Baston from Franklin Templeton's Head of Digital Assets, and Joseph Shalom, Blackrock, Head of Strategic Partnerships. I like starting sessions like this by sort of setting the scene and just finding out what you are talking about with your clients and your colleagues right now. So, Joseph, same sort of thing to you. What's top of your mind?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Coinbase is a really important partner of ours. We're spending most of our time speaking to our clients about 3 topics. One is just all things tokenization, not what it means in the short term, but what is the promise and potential in the long term, and how does it affect their business? Second is, how can responsible, well-reserved stablecoins play a role, not just in the movement of money, but breaking down friction in institutional money movements? And third, a lot of questions about DeFi. What is DeFi? If, when the regulatory hurdles are overcome, how will that be something that affects their business? And there's lots of false narratives, DeFi versus CeFi, and I think we can get into that. But I think as important as the potential changes on their business, we're spending an equal amount of time understanding the short-term blockers. And each and every one of these has regulatory, technology, maturity blockers. And how can we play a role with our clients in finding ways to unblock to the benefit of our clients? Where we're not spending a lot of time is in random POCs, because our strong belief is if it's not in production, if it's not in the client's hands, that's not innovation, that's experimentation.
That's a good line.
So you heard the head of strategic partnerships at Blackrock, the largest asset manager in the world with trillions on assets under management.
One of the things that we're doing is we're looking at the barriers to enterprise adoption of DeFi and Web3 technologies. What's preventing enterprises from using those technologies? And there's areas in tokenization, in liquidity, in compliance, identity, those kinds of barriers to sort of institutional adoption. I think, we think that institutional adoption can be a huge driver of DeFi growth and can make it more attractive to these bottom-up approaches. And that's something that is hard to do on a small scale. So I think that's something where Ripple's unique ability, the things that Ripple has, the people that we have, the money that we have, and the sort of the skill set that we've built around building software that enterprises can rely on, is unique.
3/4 of global financial institutions are interested in using DeFi to meet their business needs.
As far as the future of the automated market maker, I think also Ripple's been working hard on identity solutions to allow more enterprise adoption, sanctions compliance particularly. Enterprises will not participate in any financial system where they might inadvertently accept money from or send money to like a sanctioned entity, because the penalties are just so high, they just won't do it. And so coming up with some sort of solution to those types of problems, I think is what we're going to be focusing on. Our 2023 emphasis is going to be around removing barriers to enterprise adoption to DeFi technologies.
I think speaking about tokenization, yes, there's a regulatory angle to this, but if you take a step back, the promises are digitally native, interoperable, crossing borders, instant settlement, lower cost, democratization. I think the blockers that we're focused on are within our own control, not necessarily regulators. We need to coalesce on an asset class or two. Right now, everyone is trying to tokenize everything. And if you're trying to tokenize everything on every platform that don't interoperate, and you then don't have depth of liquidity, what is the promise? So I think there's an element of the industry needs to coalesce around things. I think there's an element of we need institutional custodians to step in and play roles and participate in digital token economies.
And the similarities in the verbiage between what he's saying and what David Schwartz is saying, and you'll listen to more here about breaking down these regulatory barriers. So there are some regulatory barriers, and the biggest being identity, but there's an appetite from these big buy side. So buy side is the asset management side. This is the other side of capital markets. You have the sell side, which is your banks, your JP Morgan, your Citibank. They are the ones who are more of the intermediaries who make off the spreads. So the buy side that's why they're more of a first moving on this than the sell side, which is the banks, even though there are banks that are involved. And Project Guardian Phase 2 in Singapore, SBI, DBS Bank, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, but without JP Morgan this time, interestingly enough, where they were part of it in Phase 1, they're doing real pilots on public blockchains. And now they're testing permissioned blockchains. And as David Schwartz said, those islands of compliance. So within a public blockchain, you can't change the blockchain to be regulatory compliant. That's not how this works. The blockchains are infrastructure. They don't get regulated. They're not going to be taken over by institutions. These are infrastructures. Now, at the same time, the Blackrock head of strategic partnerships said they see this as a longer term impact, and they say it's going to be monumental. But in the short term, there's going to be some hesitancy. So they're not going to come all rushing and flooding in. At the same time, they're going to come in, and there's just going to be a continuous wave after wave as things are proven out. Like Franklin Templeton already has in production on Polygon public tokenized money market funds. These things are coming. And with Project Guardian, that's part of, and now the Financial Service Authority of Japan is involved. So this triangle of Switzerland, Singapore, and Japan have full regulatory clarity for all digital assets. So I just think a combination of the Switzerland and Japan, these are regions that have regulatory clarity. Like Brad Garlinghouse said, the jurisdictions that are providing that clarity is where we're going to make acquisitions, and we're going to press our advantage, and they're going to build in and build more offices. That's why Singapore, Japan, with Ripple Asia, they're going to keep growing. And now in the Middle East is the other region that I think is very big that they're going to grow into.
Our opinion is adoption over the next several years will be slower than people expect, but the adoption and impact in the long term is going to be monumental in shaping our ecosystem. I just think we overestimate the short term and underestimate the long-term impact. We have very large, long-term thinking institutional clients, capital I. They're willing to wait it out, and they just want to know when and how to participate. They're not speculators, they're not traders, they have long horizons. Institutional DeFi. There's clearly an understanding, and people believe that DeFi is just another way of replicating everything in central finance, but just with decentralized players. We actually think in the long run, but there will be a role for smart contracts, for deep pools of liquidity, who can basically create really creative pairs and allow transactions in a different way than can happen in the centralized space. People talk a lot about, oh, DeFi won't work because it's automated market making and we need central order limit books. Like, that is just a fig leaf. We need clear understanding of who is in a pool. You may have seen our friends at Uniswap launched version 4. If you read carefully, there's almost an ability to create a permissioned pool, a permission contract with a group of people. That's a step forward, but I think it's going to be very hard for large regulated institutions, no matter what liquidity is available, to participate without these blockers. What's interesting is I don't think it will eventually be a DeFi versus CeFi. To your point about custody, I'm not sure any institution who will trust a decentralized protocol to be custodying their assets. There will be roles for people like Coinbase who have, institutional grade wallets to maybe be a bridge between DeFi and traditional investors. I just live in a highly regulated space, and so do our customers. That said, again, I'm an optimist. I'm not optimistic that we're going to solve the digital identity issue, which is a blocker for anyone to participate, the anti-money laundering issue, the KYC issue.
But I think that we are seeing specific blockers to institutional adoption. Like, one of the ones that's the simplest and easiest to talk about is sanctions compliance. So your listeners may not know that, like, the United States government has a list of entities that you are not allowed to do business with. And if you do, the sanctions can be, the punishment can be extremely high. And I didn't know I was doing business with them is not an excuse. It's what's called strict liability. It means if you did it, you have to figure out a way not to do it, or you can't do the thing that might create the chance that you'll do it. And this is a real blocker to institutional adoption of DeFi. It's just one example, but it's for many companies. It's like, if we can't do sanctions compliance, we can't do it. It's just a hard no. Because they're facing potentially tens of millions of dollars, plus in liability, and there's nothing they can do about it. They're just not going to do it. And so those are problems that are very tangible today. And so solutions like identity and sort of creating a sort of island inside the ocean where there's compliance, these sort of steps towards compliance will help to bring institutions into the DeFi world. And I hope we can do that without trying to change, Bank of America is not going to use SushiSwap. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. And SushiSwap is not going to require people to prove absence of sanctions compliance in order to use it, because there's just there's no practical way for them to do that. And so the thing is, if what is the solution that doesn't try to impose one regulatory regime on an entire blockchain? Like, Ethereum is not in the EU ecosystem. The XRPL is not under US government jurisdiction. So the challenge is, if we're going to have public blockchains that aren't in jurisdictions, how can we allow enterprises to comply with regulations if they want to, which they do because they won't adopt the technologies if they can. But also, a lot of what I do is about the company strategy. We're like a leading company in a rapidly evolving space. And so we're building products for customers that don't exist, and we're trying to predict where the market's going to be when our initiatives come to fruition. And when you do that, you can't just ask your customers what they want, because your customers don't exist yet, or you don't know who they are. And so it's a little bit more of a discipline of tracking what's going on in the space, external changes like regulation, technology, internal ideas that you have, and then aiming that into a strategy and then fine-tuning that. And that's a significant fraction of really what all of the senior leadership at Ripple does, but I particularly tend to focus on that. I have zero reports. There's nobody who reports to me. There's nobody who will say that I'm their boss, which I like.
But David Schwartz says, we're building for a future where we don't know who our customers are going to be and when our initiatives come to fruition. That implies the initiatives aren't even out yet. So we are still early, and that's just an acceptance thing here. But the community is lagging in the understanding of the impact of DeFi. And I'm going to keep beating this drum because this is what is happening. This isn't speculation. This is straight from, you're hearing it from the Blackrock guy. He goes, what are the 3 things we're focusing on? Tokenization, stable coins, and DeFi. And compliance. What are the 4 things Ripple's focusing on? Liquidity, tokenization, compliance, and custody. Those are the main barriers. So they're building for a world that's coming. So this convergence with crypto, tokenization of capital markets is all going to come, but they're not all regulatory blockers. There's some collaborative efforts that need to be made where you just can't do things in silos. So the ecosystem as a whole needs to come together, but it's not going to happen because the BIS centralized narrative platform is going to just appear out of nowhere and is going to flip a switch. That's just the narrative and propaganda from them. So what is real and in production, like the BlackRock head of partnership said, the executive C-suite said, we want to see production grade, not theoretical experiments. That's all. A lot of that BIS stuff, even though they're partially involved, though, with Project Guardian, which is interesting, a lot of it's experiments. And experiments are just that, experiments. And this is why Ripple has a unique advantage. And now what is that unique advantage? Well, they have a production live in operation for multiple years, moving billions of dollars in value through RippleNet. Now, RippleNet was initially set up as a messaging platform for fiat payments. It has since evolved. And now it's becoming more of a distribution platform where the documents actually have been open source, so we could see some of the smart order routing. It's a component of their patent, which is the transaction service and engine management system, which is what? A distributed exchange and trading platform and electronic market making. That is what their business is. You could think of that as like an enterprise or layer 2 like value exchange. And then you have underneath the blockchain. So the AMM liquidity pools on XRP Ledger are the underlying pipelines for liquidity. So BlackRocks and these institutions, one day they might not ever interact with those actual protocols at the blockchain layer, but they'll be orchestrated by Ripple. And now that Ripple bought out Medico, that's their whole thing for 6 years they've been working on, bridging DeFi and crypto in general together, crypto and traditional markets together. So that is a huge help to Ripple's strategy. And that's why they spent $250 million, because that acquisition now ties them in to so many more places. And what else do they have that's uniquely positioning them? These private CBDC ledgers. And the community got off to on the wrong foot with what these private ledgers are. Anyone who tells you that these are not impactful or these don't have to do with XRP, so they're not relevant, does not truly understand what is taking place here. And not everyone's at that level. It's totally understandable. And everyone's at a different knowledge level here. It's not about how long even you've been here. It's a continuous learning, and the space is continuously evolving. We've been hampered by the SEC case, and it's caused the community to lag. So it's not necessarily the mass adoption of crypto per se. The financial system is changing in front of us. But one thing it's hard to wrap our heads around this because it's been always one way. It's like the central banks dictate what's going to be, and they're going to sit at Bretton Woods and they're going to make a decision. But like the internet, which came and just completely bulldozed over the prior way information was transferred. This is what will happen with blockchain, Web3, Internet of Value. It will completely just bulldoze as we need machine-to-machine payments and micropayments, and new business models will be created, and they'll be created by these institutions. But if you notice the language, and this is something I think that is important to separate, when people say the big banks are coming or the big asset managers, what are they coming for and what are they coming to do? They're there to make profit for their customers and their clients. And to an extent, the control thing, is more on the central bank side. And BlackRock's invested in Circle. So that's the opposite side of which you'll see banks wanting deposit tokens. So there'll be this world where we have deposit tokens, we'll have stable coins, we'll have CBDCs. We don't really know what's going to happen on the fiat side, the monetary side, but that's all going to get dictated by this existing financial system. Is in DeFi, crypto. It's just progressing. There's no stopping this. Regulatory will only accelerate it. And tokenization is going to light a fire underneath it that will just be like rocket fuel, because you're bringing on real world assets. And it's a nascent market, and it will get regulated to an extent. And it's kind of more than just regulating it and putting the old traditional regulations in it. It's about having the blockchain designed and tweaked through enhancements, like, for example, like what they're doing, what XRP Ledger is doing with XLS40D, which is the digital identifiers, making it so it's going to be compatible to allow for trust anchors to verify. So it doesn't change any of the decentralization of the blockchain, but it makes it easy for a regulatory compliance layer to come on top. And it has this certain design feature. So trust lines compared to smart contracts is a key difference here. They're built in to allow for compliance. Nobody can use that asset if it doesn't have a trust line. And by adding things like the clawback, which is, I think, XLS39D, will enhance that capabilities for regulated assets. So what's a regulated asset? That's just digital securities. This is why I don't see Ripple doing a traditional IPO. I don't think there's a chance, there's like almost a 0% chance they do a traditional IPO. And the conversation about this has been all assuming that's traditional IPO. I don't see that personally. Everything's about tokenizing the future. If your business model is built on tokenizing everything, why would you then go and do a legacy IPO? That makes zero sense, and it's actually contradictory. And it would send the wrong message. So, 2 years ago, if you asked, this was a different conversation because they weren't fully focused on tokenization. They haven't even fully put out the full model, but Liquidity Hub is at the core here. And the AMMs are at the core of XRP's economic model. So there's a recent discussion on Twitter about XRP being staked and the idea, and it got people talking. Now, I do not agree that you just don't stake to stake. Staking is going to happen in the liquidity pools. And in the long term, as 1 year goes by, 2 years, 3 years, the networks that have a sustainable economy, because you have to look at these layer one blockchains as economies, almost like nations in their way, but a new type, where they have a reserve currency for that network. And off that network, you could have like states, which will be like side chains or layer twos. And those might have their own types of governance structures in them. They have the same reserve asset for the most part. And there'll be differences the way there's provinces in Canada and states in the US. And there's different types of designs. But there's one core asset at the center. But that asset only exists because of its underlying network. And then it has this powerful feature, as Glenn Hutchins told us, the three components. You have the network, the asset, and the protocols. The protocols are the single most important because that's what XRP has built-in programmable protocols. That's what allows the distributed and decentralized exchange with a matching engine. Like, it has a built-in matching engine that matches orders, and is connected to a payment execution engine, which pathfinds the best liquidity at the best price. This is far superior than any exchange. So ultimately, that's why it's always been looked at as Coinbase and Ripple competitors. Now, with the idea of relationships and them going through this common enemy at the SEC, hopefully there'll be some collaboration there. I'm not saying they're going to be strategic partners, but I think it's important because they're also trying to do the same things. Ultimately, they want to be this institutional bridge to crypto and DeFi. XRP to be at least on the same level playing field with Bitcoin and Ethereum. And the XRP Ledger needs to now, and the community is going to be from bottom up. We're going to have multiple side chains launching. This is not speculation, and I understand people I've seen in the comments say, when is this going to happen? When's this going to happen? Patience, because when it comes, you're going to be overwhelmed. And it's not going to be just like an initiative, boom, oh my God, I'm rich off to the island, and then everything's great. It's going to be, this is the light. This is the entire financial system transitioning. And DeFi is still nascent, but why are clients of Blackrock going to Blackrock asking about DeFi? Even Robbie Mitchnick I listened to 2 podcasts, and he says that is by far the most interesting thing for the financial markets because it's a new way of doing financial transactions, like trading, like AMMs, even the Blackrock. So the Blackrock strategic partnership said, there's no this thing that, you have to have order books and a centralized thing only. It's a fig leaf. He goes, no. He goes, you need deep pools of liquidity with interesting pairings. And then he says, our friends at Uniswap, he was familiar with the Uniswap V4 white paper. Tell me how many people in the XRP community know anything about the Uniswap V4 white paper? Probably very few. But see, that's what they're focusing on. So that's what you need to focus on.
We're trying to incentivize the development of an ecosystem around XRP. I think, and with what Ripple's doing on the banking side, we're trying to position XRP as that sort of intermediary asset that can provide liquidity between other assets. And I think if those efforts are successful, that's going to be a reason to use that asset. If it's more liquid, if it's cheaper to transfer, if it has all these technological advantages that optimize it for that use case. So I think it's that building of an ecosystem.
Now, building an institutional DeFi ecosystem can have profound effects on XRP as time progresses, but it might not be the first thing that's used, but the underlying pipelines being built, the AMMs for liquidity at the foundation, that's significant. And why is it significant? It's because you and I and everyone in the community who has XRP can provide liquidity in these global pools of public liquidity that people can contribute to and draw off. That is XRP's value proposition. No matter how much people want to ignore and have selective hearing when it comes to what David Schwartz says.
A lot of what I do is about the company strategy. We're like a leading company in a rapidly evolving space. And so we're building products for customers that don't exist. And we're trying to predict where the market's going to be when our initiatives come to fruition.
But I do envision this future where you might have distributed applications that provide services to other distributed applications. Right. And you have this ecosystem that just is optimized to provide each of these different services at very low cost with very high reliability. And essentially, it's providing every service that you would need trustlessly.
I actually believe this technology is going to be very important. I believe the next generation for markets, the next generation for securities will be tokenization of securities.